You're now live.
Okay, we're live and we're gonna call Senate Finance to order. This is April 9th, and today I have Global Foundries as a utility on the agenda. I don't know that there's a bill attached to this, so Mr. Ryder, did I get your name correctly?
Actually, it's Reader.
Reader, okay. I'm going to turn the floor over to you and tell us what Global Foundries is interested in.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Senator Cummings. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Greg Reader, and I'm a registered professional engineer by the state of Vermont, and my primary responsibilities is the oversight of the engineering, operations, and maintenance of the electrical infrastructure at the Essex facility for Global Foundries. First, I would like to thank the entire committee for allowing me to testify on behalf of Global Foundries regarding the proposed self-managed utility. Personally, I am very excited about the proposal, and it's the result of tremendous amount of hard work by both Global Foundries and Green Mountain Power over the last 2 years, and most recently by Velco. I would like to give you a brief 5 to 10 minute overview of about 6 slides detailing the self-managed utility proposal. At the end of the presentation, I will be happy to answer any questions the committee may have. So with that said, let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yep.
Good. So following a long collaborative process, Global Foundries, Green Mountain Power, and Velco have reached an agreement on a proposal for Global Foundries to become a self-managed utility, and we both filed petitions of certificate of public good around March 15th to the PUC. So this is really just an informational only type meeting. We're not seeking any new bills in regards to this proposal. This is just going through the PUC petition process, but we wanted to give everyone an up-to-date on what we're doing. This is really great news for Global Foundries and Vermont because it allows GF to become more globally competitive and create parity across all of its plants, as well as achieve our shared goals to protect existing manufacturing jobs in Vermont and improve the prospects of further investment. So with that being said, let me tell you a little bit about Global Foundries first. Global Foundries is a US semiconductor manufacturing plant headquartered in Santa Clara, California, which has about 16,000 employees worldwide. GF was created in 2009 and is owned by Mubadala Investment Company. In 2014, Global Foundries acquired both Fab 9, which we all know as the Essex Junction facility, and Fab 10, which is the East Fishkill facility, from IBM. GF's core business is the design and manufacture of microchips for various companies you see on this chart right here. What I want everyone to understand is where GF is in this overall market. We're actually at the bottom of this market, of this cone, which is actually a $63 billion market industry. But the point that I want to make here is Global Foundries only has a very small market share of less than 10%, but we expect to grow in the future, which provides opportunity for all our plants worldwide. So on this slide, what I want to illustrate is where our plants are located. Obviously, we're all familiar with the plant in Burlington, which is our Fab 9 plant. And then we actually have 2 plants in New York, one in East Fishkill, and then one in Malta. And then in Germany, we have another plant, Dresden, and then in Singapore, we actually have 6 plants in Singapore and are in the process of building another plant as we speak. or going through the design of it. The point that I want to make on this slide is we have several plants around the world that we can easily move technology from one plant to the other. Where you see the size 200 millimeter versus 300 millimeter, that's really the size of the wafer these chips are made on. It's not really has anything to do with the technology. So with that being said, let me move on to the next slide. Let's talk more about our Burlington site, or the Essex Junction, which Global Foundries we refer to as Fab 9. Our market segment is in the mobile area, the wireless infrastructure, automotive, and industrial and medical segments. I think one really cool fact about Fab 9 or Burlington is that 85% of the cell phones worldwide, we have at least one chip that's manufactured in Vermont. I think that's something that we all can be very proud of. You know, obviously when they got 85% of the phones that have that plant, that's one of the reasons why Vermont export, Global Foundries has about 43% of Vermont exports. Presently, we employ about 2,200 people at the site. And one of the things that is critical or unique about the facilities here at Burlington in this manufacturing process is that we are a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, 365-day manufacturing process. And this process is intensely requirement of electricity. Our power demand is significant, and we actually consume more energy than the entire city of Burlington. Our annual consumption is about 400 gigawatt hours a year, which equates to approximately 8% of the Vermont state load. We actually have two 115 kV transmission lines that provide power to the site, which is unique to any other business here in the state. And the reason for those transmission lines is because of the size of our load and our processes. So the primary issue, the primary issue for Fab 9 is we must remain competitive worldwide. Our electric cost is nearly 50% of the operational cost of the site to support manufacturing. In fact, when you compare our unit cost, it's approximately 90% higher than the sites in New York. One of the key components during our analysis was GF can move their technology to any of the sites worldwide. Second point is that GF is a risk tolerant for purchasing power on the open market and is experienced in grid management and purchasing energy on the open market. Our goal was, by closing this cost gap in New York, Fab 9 becomes more competitive to not only to its plants in New York, but also to the plants worldwide, thus improving capital expansion and growth opportunities for Fab 9. So our solution was, since 2019, Global Foundries and GMP have developed a very strong collaboration team, which actually was ordered by the PUC to find ways to create greater stability and sustainability for Global Foundries in the long term. One of the requirements for both sides was not to impact GMP's or the state's electric customers, regardless of the alternative that was chosen. One of the options outlined in December 2019 report to the PUC was to establish GF as a single customer utility. That later was developed more to what we're calling today is a self-managed utility. This solution is only possible because GF is the largest Vermont customer and has direct connection to the 115 kV transmission line. And in addition, it owns and maintains its entire distribution system, which equates to roughly about a $3 million annually cost to GF. What this model does will allow GF to manage its own distribution system and supply its own load. Simultaneously, it will also remove GF from GMP's territory, retail load, and service obligations. This proposal includes a 4-year transition to GMP to provide energy, capacity, and the renewable attributes through a power purchase agreement, which also includes a transition fee during that 4-year period to offset the otherwise stranded costs by GMP and lessen the rate impact to the customers. Global Foundries SMU, if will be considered the 3rd largest utility in the state if approved by the PUC, but only will be serving itself. So what are the benefits of the self-managed utility? It is truly a win-win for both Vermont as a whole and GF. One, it allows GF to purchase power on the open market, meeting its own goals and strategies in order to manage risk across all of GF's manufacturing plants to improve not only global competitiveness, but to improve prospects for growing Vermont. Second, and most importantly for Vermont, it remains a critical component in the economy here in Vermont. Third, Velco maintains GF as a wholesale transmission customer, which benefits all the electric customers statewide. Fourth, it also allows GF to further improve its clean energy standards as a self-managed utility. And lastly, the question is, why now? Well, what's the old saying? Timing is everything. The semiconductor chip business is in very high demand today. And actually there is a shortage worldwide, providing a tremendous opportunity, not only to GF as a whole, but for Fab 9's Essex facility. So I'm going to stop there and answer any questions that the committee may have in regards to the self-managed utility.
Okay. Greg, can you take down your screen, or are you going, okay, you are down. Okay, Senator Bray, I see, has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ryder. I have just a few questions so I can understand. I mean, it's an interesting and innovative idea, taking on managing your own power supply. As a utility, if you become an electric utility, then is it Global Foundries' plan to, I guess, behave as all the other electric utilities do? And I'm thinking in particular of their other wraparounds in utility law, for instance, to meet the state's renewable energy standard, to be a receiver of standard offer power, to manage an energy efficiency, either join in an energy efficiency utility or, and you know, all those policy provisions that currently guide the behavior of our existing utilities.
Senator Bray, that's an excellent question. And let me start off with, as being a self-managed utility, we won't be similar to all the other utilities in the state. For the main reason is that we will be only serving our customer, our own selves. We will not be serving any retail customers, which all the other utilities do. So we will be set up to only serve ourselves and no one else. Regarding the question on energy efficiency, and I'm going to take this in 2 parts. One, I'm going to want to cover the energy efficiency question, and then I want to cover the renewable portfolio question. So the energy efficiency question, GF's corporate philosophy to be a worldwide industry leader with clean energy standards and be globally recognized for environment sustainability. GF's environment stewardship and efficiency are directly intertwined with GF's business goals. Since Global Foundries took over in 2014, GF has made over $7 million in energy efficiency investments and saved over 12 million kilowatt hours of electricity. If the SMU is approved by the PUC, Global Foundries intends to continue making $1 million annually in energy efficiency during that transition period from 2022 to 2025 and file annual reports to the PUC as it does now under SMEEP. Over the next 2 years, Global Foundries will evaluate additional efficiencies investments as well as demand reduction opportunities that are only possible because of the new SMU structure, and will detail those future plans in a report to the PUC. The benefit of this 4-year transition period is it allows GF time to evaluate expanding energy efficiency investments to include further greenhouse gas emissions reductions and peak shaving opportunities such as battery storage. So we will absolutely continue with energy efficiency projects, and that's our plan as we move forward. And that's part of the benefit of signing this MOU with Green Mountain Power to allow us this 4-year transition.
Okay. So I guess I wasn't quite sure what the answer was on some of those. So I might as well turn them in individual items.
Yep.
The RES, would you consider your new entity bound by the terms of the RES?
So let me because I want to answer that as a separate question to the energy efficiency project, okay? So the commitment to the renewable energy as SMU will continue not only do our corporate policies for the initial 4-year period. During the transition, Global Foundries will procure power through a power purchase agreement with GMP, and its power supply will maintain characteristics of the GMP portfolio as a whole, including GMP's compliance to the renewable energy standards. So during those 4 years, we will be complying with the existing energy standards of Vermont through that PPA that we will be signing from 2022 to 2026. In addition, during that 4-year transition period, GF will develop and implement a clean power procurement plan. That goal will be to create cost-competitive power procurement strategies that align the expectations of our key stakeholder customers, and it will be submitted to the Vermont regulators for review and approval. Before January of 2026, GF will submit a formal report to the PUC for the review of this overall strategy.
Okay, so during the 4-year period, it's GMP that has the obligation, whether you're an off-taker or not. So sounds like you're sort of passively meeting the requirements of the law by purchasing from them. The obligation still falls to them. I guess I'm really asking post-transition if you would consider Global Foundries bound by the RES.
As far as being technically bound by the RES, I don't believe that. It is my understanding that the renewable energy standards, as it is written today, only applies to utilities serving retail customers. As a SMU, GF will only be serving itself. So, however, we as a Global Foundries will still be procuring renewable energy in the future. And that's part of our plan during that 4-year transition period to develop that plan to submit to the PUC for review and approval.
Okay, so then I guess the other things I mentioned, I mean, there's a lot more to it, but just 3 high top line things where the RES standard offer power and having an energy efficiency utility obligation or energy efficiency charge remitted to an energy efficiency utility. So it sounds as though because you're defining yourself uniquely in law, not as a normal retail electric utility, that none of these will apply. They will be you'll make proposals that are similar to them in some way, but unique to your proposal, to your business situation.
Senator Bray, you're spot on. That's exactly right, because they won't apply to us as a self-managed utility, but we are most definitely going to follow them in a plan that will be reviewed by the PUC and approved, both from an energy efficiency standpoint and from a renewable energy portfolio.
Okay, and sorry, there is a lot of details. So this one seems like one worth getting clear. What statute will drive control for the obligations that this new entity would have to meet? I mean, for all the other utilities, it's clear it's in Title 30. Where is it specified what standards and statutes that you will meet are?
That, I'm going to have to defer that answer to our legal team.
Okay,
I do not want to state a statute without being 100% confident.
sure.
So I'm going to defer that to our legal team, and I can get back to the committee on that.
Great. I mean, it's not a gotcha question. It's just we're trying to be clear about what's ruled in and what's ruled out, and it'll be helpful to know what rules, procedures, documents are guiding where the lines are drawn. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator Brock, did you have
Thank you. Unlike Senator Bray, I'm still taking Energy 101. So I've got a couple or three basic questions. And that first is, with this plan that you have, are you asking us to do anything?
Actually, no. This is more of an awareness. This proposal as a self-managed utility is all within the existing statutes, and we're not asking the legislative area to develop new laws to allow this to happen. So this is more of an awareness. We are going to be going through the PUC process for review and approval.
How long a period of time do you think will elapse before you get either approval or disapproval? Any idea?
Yeah, right now, I believe the tentative schedule is for around mid-November.
Okay.
And then this would actually take place in October of 2022.
Mm-hmm. Okay, makes sense. The last question is, what impact, once this is done, do you anticipate it having on ratepayers?
Excellent question. And I'm going to defer that question to Josh, but before I do, I want to at least make this statement. Both GMP and GF, when we started this process, we were both acutely focused on minimizing any cost to the GMP customers and structured a series of payments to GMP during this 4-year transition period to accomplish that. In addition, Global Foundries will also pay for costs that will be incurred by the DUs with the associated transmission costs through Velco over the 20 years. Josh, would you like to enhance on any of those, on that question?
we've got Josh coming up next, so
Okay, I'm sorry.
we'll let him do the whole Green Mountain Power
Okay.
thing.
Very good.
Okay, Senator Brock, is that, okay, Senator McDonald?
Madam Chair, I'm overwhelmed by the proposal. It's obviously been done over 2 years without our being consulted. I was around when we provided in statute an opportunity for the plant to conduct its own energy efficiency activities, which were mentioned moments ago, how many millions of dollars that were spent. There are many aspects of this proposal that are unknown to us. One of perhaps 50 questions we might ask is, so you've saved X number of dollars in energy efficiency, how much would the grid have saved had it gone through Efficiency Vermont? And that has to do with low-hanging fruit, etc. And if I were to ask that question, it would be a waste of the time today. We will be asking ourselves, Madam Chair, where the authority was given for the PUC to make such a ruling. We've already heard the question of how is this going to affect ratepayers? And the answer was suggested in the original presentation that there'll be a transition period to worry about that sort of thing. There's been 2 years, I think they pretty much have an idea of what this would cost ratepayers. So that's a fair question to ask today. But I shouldn't be surprised, but I'm disappointed that that this enterprise is seeking to take what they can best serve themselves and leaving the grid that was paid for and others things to fend for themselves. And I expect that the best face will be put on it. But I guess this is the way we sometimes see business being done. So I've fallen victim to having committee discussion and giving opinions. But I think, Madam Chair, we would be well advised to come up with a list of questions and write them down and seek some answers. And then surprised the PUC didn't share with us that they believe that their authority extended into such areas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sarah McDonald reminds me that I would be interested to hear from the PUC on some of those questions. But my question for Greg is building on Senator Bray's question of efficiency and renewable energy, specifically procurement. The way you describe it, it's all, it sounds like you're saying we have this plan and we'll have that reviewed by the PUC, but after the fact. And I'm wondering if you can tell us and tell Vermonters, what is the commitment? Is it to buy 30% of your energy renewably sourced or 80%? We had a utility in Vermont put out an announcement 2 days ago that they'll be 100% carbon free in the next 3 years, I think. So these questions are very relevant to Vermont and to all of us. And I'm hoping you can tell us it's more than we're going to do it and let you know what we do.
Excellent question. And Senator Pearson, I don't have the numbers in front of me to tell you. And one of the reasons why is Global Foundries as a corporate entity right now is actually drafting up the next 3 years of their goals. And that report is planning on being shared with the PUC in August of this year as part of our program going forward with this SMU. As far as what we're doing today, Green Mountain Power is supplying all of our renewable attributes. And I believe it's roughly about 70% of our portfolio is renewables from GMP. And when you look at our carbon footprint compared to the other site, it is the lowest amongst all of our plants. And GF as a corporation does not want to see that increase. And for two reasons. One, being a good corporate citizen. And two, our customers are starting to want their products only be manufactured with green energy. And that number varies between our customers. So that's why this 4-year transition will help us determine between our customers and the state to determine what is the best power portfolio that both entities will be able to agree on.
So, I look forward to hearing from Josh, but Green Mountain Power doesn't deliver to you the greenest energy just because they want to. Maybe they do, but it's also, responding to state law. And in the years ahead, the vision is not that we relax that. In fact, quite the opposite, right? We have emission targets in law, and you as a significant business citizen, hopefully can be a partner there. So are you saying that before this is signed off and greenlit from the regulators, you expect to have a in writing promise to Vermonters that we can understand your energy source in terms of renewable percentages and things like that? Are you saying that will be part of because the way you described it initially was more like an update, a report after the fact.
And Senator Pearson, that's exactly what I'm describing. This will allow Global Foundries during that 4-year transition to develop our overall renewable energy portfolio as we move forward after 2026. And this report will be shared for approval, review and approval by the PUC.
There is review and approval by the PUC. You can't just decide you're going to go buy cheaper energy from a coal plant in the Midwest.
Senator Cummings, absolutely not. And the reason why is because our GF's corporate policy for clean energy would not allow that, nor would our customers even allow that. Our customers are also right now are looking at what is our greenhouse gas emissions at all our plants, depending on where that their product is being manufactured. And if that doesn't meet their standards, we have to change it. And by staying right here the way we are now, as a self-managed utility, we may be able to increase it on our own to meet their demands.
So if that's the case, then why ask to be exempted from that function of state law?
Well, the state law, the way it exists written today, only includes utilities with serving retail customers. And we will be a self-managed utility serving only ourselves. Similar to SMEEP. SMEEP only applies to rate 70 transmission customers, and we will no longer be a rate 70 customer. However, as I stated earlier, we will continue with a SMEEP-like program because of we're good corporate citizens, and that's a way for the Global Foundries to save energy also. I mean, that's one of our costs that is driving us to be more competitive, is looking at our energy costs.
Okay. And I think when you started, and I think some people may have been late getting here, that one of the big differences between you and your other US plants, the 2 in New York, and worldwide plants was your energy costs. Yours were much higher. And so in order to remain competitive, even within your own corporation, you're looking for ways to get it down. But your corporation also has policies about renewable energy, and well, efficiency works for you. We did make you your own efficiency utility, I believe.
That's correct.
But because you are this strange new animal, the rules are still being developed, or you will be bringing your proposal to the PUC, who then can approve or disapprove it. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct.
Okay. Senator Hardy, I saw you, and then I see Senator Bray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if Greg, if you're or Josh can answer this. I'm scrolling through our statutes to find the section and statute under which you're doing this operation, because I think some of our questions are about what are actually legal questions about what you are or aren't allowed to do during this process, or how this process works, and then what you are or aren't allowed to do if it's approved by the PUC. And those are laws of the state of Vermont, and we are the lawmakers of the state of Vermont. So if we don't like them, we can change them, obviously through a process. But I can't find in statute the citation that describes the process you're going through right now. Do you know what that is? Or Josh, do you know? We don't have our legal counsel with us right now, but.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's why I said I want to defer that question or the answer, because I don't want to state, we have a whole legal team that can actually state exactly what statutes exist and apply. But And like I said, we can get back to you on that.
Well, maybe we can ask our legislative counsel, because it would be interesting to hear them describe this process. Because it is a process that is allowed under law for you to do this. And I just want to know what that is, and what you are subject to and what you aren't subject to, and what our authority is and isn't. And yeah, so if we could get ledge counsel to tell us that, that'd be helpful.
Absolutely.
Senator Bray.
Yeah, now Senator Hardy has just stated in more detail my question. It's like what law, a quick search of statute for the term self-managed utility brings up nothing. Now, it may exist in there somewhere, it might be described another way, who knows? So, but it will be helpful to all of us to know what the rules of the road are as we look at it. Thank you.
Okay.
And I think a self-managed utility is a new animal. But I'm assuming either in our law or in the laws that govern the PUC, it's like, and the commissioner has the power to make rules, that there is probably some kind of broad-based statute that gives them authority, but we will check on it.
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
gonna,
my
yeah.
understanding, Senator Cummings, is everything that we're doing here is under the existing statutes. My only issue is I can't tell you exactly what those statutes are. That's not my
well,
area.
neither can we find them, so.
But to be honest, we will get back to you on that. It's a
Okay.
legitimate question.
And if
I understand.
Senator Hardy can't find them, they're not there to be found.
They probably are there. I'm not a lawyer, but I mean, I would like to
No,
hear.
but you're very good at research.
I'd love doing that. And Greg, I want to hear from your legal team. I definitely do, but I also want to hear from our own legislative counsel and their explanation of it. So.
Absolutely, Senator.
Senator Pearson.
Thank you. I just want to echo what this conversation. I hope we can have a follow-up. As I understand it, our statutes contemplate utilities, and utilities are entities that sell power to somebody else. And so I still remain slightly baffled how we can contemplate the PUC sort of improvising. But
Yeah.
obviously they have regulatory discretion. So anyway, I look forward to hearing from your lawyers, our own lawyers, and the commission.
But what, I don't know how, if the PUC, because if this is a pending case, they can't talk very much to us, but maybe we could get somebody over there to tell us what they're looking at as the powers that they're using to do this. Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to get on to Josh Castingay. And
Yep.
got it. Good. Because I've been doing terrible on names lately. Okay.
No, nice job. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Madam Chair and Committee. So again, my name is Josh Castingay with Green Mountain Power. I lead our innovation, engineering, and generation work, and then worked with the team throughout the work that we did with Greg on Global Foundries. And right off, one thing I will mention, because I did ask on your question, Senator Hardy, the way we filed this, it is under Title 30, and it was under Section 231 for the general petition. And Section 249 is what allows you to like split up territory for utility territory. So those are the two sections. I'm also not a lawyer, so any more than that, we'll have to have our team come in and talk through. But
that's where the lawyers told you it was coming from.
That's right. Exactly. So I just really want to take 1 or 2 minutes to talk about it from GMP's perspective, why we do think it's the right thing to do for customers. So, ultimately, as you can imagine, the lens that we look at this through right out of the gate was from our customers' perspective. And then there we go more broadly to Vermont as a whole. Obviously, maintaining Global Foundries as a key employer in Vermont is a very important piece of this, as well as balancing the risk to our customers and to Vermonters as a whole. The risk of GF just departing the state would have a significant impact, significant rate pressure on GMP's customers, as well as all of Vermont customers, just through how the transmission system is paid for. So when we looked at this, we wanted to look at what is the best way to make this a transition that's going to limit the impact to our customers, limit the impact to all DU customers, and help GF achieve their goals of being as competitive as possible to stay in Vermont and hopefully to grow in Vermont. And that's the transition plan that we developed with GF and ultimately with Velco as well when it comes to the transmission system. One of the things that's interesting is GF is unique. They're unique today. I mean, really, they for an operational perspective, they've been their own distribution utility since they've been IBM and before. They've operated their own substation, their own distribution system. GMP does contract maintenance for them, but it's still their facilities, and we just feed them from the 115 kV system. And they're also the only customer, as Mr. Reeder mentioned, that's fed from the 115 kV system directly to the bulk transmission. So it really sets them up in a unique position to make this transition. And then from there, we look at again the cost impact. An immediate departure GF would cost our customers in the up to 3% rate impact range, but that's not to mention the obvious economic impact that would occur well beyond that, as well as the impact to the other DUs if that were to happen. And so that's what went into our thinking and the design of this transition plan. From our perspective, from a renewable energy standpoint as well, I mean, we continue, Senator Pearson raised a good question about how we provide to customers. Our plan is to continue to exceed RES in Vermont. We're still on our path to hit 100% sooner than is required, on 100% carbon free and 100% renewable. And it continues to be with a stronger mix of new renewables built in Vermont as well. And that's not going to change from our perspective as we look forward. So that's really just wanted to give a high level of our view as we thought about this and put it together with GF. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Pearson.
Thank you, Josh. I think Greg testified 8% of the grid in Vermont, the load, excuse me. And so that would be what portion, 10% or something of yours?
Yeah, that's right. They're about 10%.
So I guess I'm struggling a little bit. This can't be win-win-win. There's just no way that everyone's an upside. Otherwise, we would have done it a long time ago. So and I understand there's a transition, and that makes a big difference, and I'm prepared to accept that. But how is it possible that the remaining 90% of your load doesn't take a hit? I mean, I really need help understanding that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So the transition period, the way that it's designed right now, GF is contributing what we're calling the transition payment through this process. That is mitigating the cost impact to customers. In the first year of the transition, there's zero, but in the remaining years of that transition, I think it's no more than 0.25% impact potentially. So there is a small impact. The way that we weighed that was against the risk of a straight departure, which obviously would have a much more significant impact. And so spreading that out, getting that guarantee over the transition period of a payment directly from GF to mitigate that. And then once they're transitioned out as their own SMU, their own self-managed utility, that risk of their departure still has a significant impact on Vermonters. It doesn't have the same impact on the electric rates and GMP customers, but that has shifted after that point.
So help me understand. I mean, the calculation, I mean, we're in a global chip shortage. We've heard, and it was exciting, I hadn't heard this, 85% of all cell phones in the world have a Vermont chip in them. They're willing to sign a many-year contract with us. This is not, and this is no fault of Global Foundries. The small states in particular deal with this dynamic all the time. I've heard about it since I was asked to vote for slush fund for Governor Shumlin. This is just always a threat, and it's a real threat, and it's maybe legitimate, and maybe it's great poker. I don't know. But we have a worldwide chip shortage. 85% of the cell phones in the world have a Vermont chip in it. They're coming to you and saying, we'll sign a many, many year contract. That does not sound to me like deep risk of flight. And at the end of it, we're just kind of hopeful that Green Mountain Power customers won't pay 2% impact. I mean, how does that, like, if you're just looking from your Green Mountain Power customer perspective on rates, is there things to be concerned about here?
It's the question of, does GF, their departure sort of, happen regardless, or does, I think the way that I've looked at it is I can appreciate, and I'm not in the chip business, but I can appreciate the information that when they provide around their competitiveness with other facilities, especially facilities that are really close that they could in theory shift to. And, and their willingness to take on the risk of playing directly in the market. I think that's one of the other big changes that GF had compared to previous, which is, instead of having a stable flat rate portfolio, they're willing to go directly into the marketplace, take the risk that comes with that. If you have a really cold winter, prices spike. There's a lot of things at play there. So their willingness to take that on also shifts some of that risk away from our customers. So to me, it goes, every so many years, we're also working with GF on this process. This is born out of the most recent term contract with GF, where it actually contemplated us discussing this kind of thing as we look forward. And so we just keep looking at it from a risk and balance with our customers. And we think at this point, the balance is right in terms of having GF continue to grow their competitiveness and shift them out of our system for customers, and not have that risk of them departing, hanging out there as much anymore.
If I remember correctly, because I've been in this since it was IBM coming here, Fishkill, Malta's a new one for me, but Fishkill has always been the bane of our existence. And if I remember going through rates, New York State has a source of cheap Niagara power, that nice big waterfall. And they have reserved that for commercial customers. So commercial rates are lower in New York and residential rates are higher. We don't allow that. So our rates, just to start with, are higher. And then, you throw in all the mixes of the efficiency utility, which we have spun off. I remember discussions with, I think it was IBM before Global Foundries, about their desire to be able to pretty much be their own utility, but to do their own power purchasing. And I thought we'd done that, but they never did it. But this has been an ongoing issue. And we heard it with the cardboard box manufacturers up in Sheldon Springs, whose name is slipping, but it was the same issue. Power costs in Vermont, for a lot of good reasons, and part of it is we're in New England, are higher than the rest of the country. And that's an issue. It's an issue for business, and it's an issue for us in trying to keep business, especially high-tech businesses, which use a lot of electricity. And it's just there at this point. So, Senator Bray, you have a question.
Yes, please. Good to see you, Mr. Cassinggay. I have a quick question about just GMP impact. So, I understand if you're in the position of thinking you're going to lose 10% of your load, a customer leaves, that might make, alternatives more attractive than just losing that. But I'm trying to think, from a really basic level, the overhead of running the GMP system, the simple math I think of divided by the number of units sold, kilowatt hours equals, your rate. So what happens when you lose 10% of your load and yet you have very little in the way of facilities, very little overhead there, right? Because it's their own substation, et cetera, et cetera. So does that not create significant rate pressure?
It would create, I mean, that's the 2 to 3% of rate pressure. Now, to your point, in their rate, the reason that their rate is justified differently than other commercial industrial rates is because of their connection directly to the bulk transmission system. They don't necessarily use as much, they don't use distribution assets of GMPs or sub transmission assets of GMPs. So that goes into the rate design. And but even with that said, that's like with a sudden departure, there would be that rate impact. And that's purely the electric rate impact. There's the obvious economic impact. And then there's also an additional transmission cost impact to all the DUs in Vermont that would have to be spread out and paid for.
So are you saying in part that they already have a rate that's not the same as other commercial takers? And so there's less of a loss because they're getting especially priced power that reflects the fact that they're a less expensive customer for you to serve, given all the assets they already have in place, like their own substation?
Yes, I think that's right. It's I'm certainly not the rate design expert. Scott Anderson, our team, does that, but the way that the rates are typically designed are based on, as I understand it, the cost to serve that either that class of customer or so. They do have a different rate, and their use of the system is a lot different than the rest of our commercial industrial customers.
Okay. And then the power that they will receive that they've been buying from you, now it could be supplied through a power purchase agreement and wheeled to them, and then it's Velco that's the intermediary. GMP is pretty much out of the picture.
So yes, in the transition period of the 4 years, GMP will be supplying GF through a PPA, through a power purchase agreement directly, and then beyond that time, then GF becomes their own power procurement. I mean, they could get a PPA in many different ways at that point, but that's correct. GMP would be supplying a PPA directly out of our existing mix with all of our continued renewable percentages and everything in there.
Okay. Last question. I know this asked for speculation, so you could say thanks, but no thanks. And that is, I'm just wondering who else, if there's another shoe to drop, this has happened out in Western states where large companies have decided they want to go this route, and they actually pay a substantial exit fee and then move into a paradigm more like this. So do you worry that this sets a precedent, and UVM Medical Center, also another large off-taker, says, we'd rather get in on the private contracting model, or Rock 10 or Husky Injection Molding? We could probably put together a list of 10 major off-takers that would like cheaper power.
I think just for starters, like, we continue to work obviously with our C&I customers constantly and looking at costs, and that includes electric costs through demand mitigation and things like that, but also total energy costs. Thanks to Res Tier 3, we're able to work with them to help lower their total costs. So that obviously continues to happen. In terms of there's a good deal of complexity to shifting to a model like GF is looking at, and back to that uniqueness that they're in, allows them to do. They have the system, they're connected to the bulk transmission system. They have people, because they do it in New York already, that can do power marketing. There's a lot of things that really make them unique. So the last example was actually a large industry in GMP's territory that actually went the other way. They were their own and came back as a customer because it wasn't a piece that they wanted to continue to manage. So I think we continue to work with our customers constantly like we do now. We're about, I think, the second lowest rates in New England from utility standpoint. We'll continue to drive that down every way we can, but I don't see this driving big change like that.
Okay, thanks very much.
Madam Chair, did you call on me? I didn't hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Am I moved my half inch back too far?
Thank you. I just, for everyone's information, thank you, Josh, Mr. Castonguay, for the citations. And if you're correct, which I think you probably are, it's done under 231 is a certificate of public good and abandonment of service. So they are abandoning Green Mountain Power service and taking on their own service and have to do a certificate of public good to do it. And then 249 is service territories and the commission's jurisdiction in establishing service territories. So they're establishing a smaller service territory for Global Foundries. That's my quick read, non-legal read of the statutes and how they're doing it. So, there's the reason that Senator Bray and I couldn't, as we were searching, find there's not a specific statute that allows this particular thing to happen.
Right.
It's just done within the context of these broader statutes. So all this being said, if there's some other guardrails we feel like in the future we want to put on for future things, we certainly could. Or not.
Okay.
Just putting it out
Okay.
there.
We've got one more witness. And if there are no more questions, I'm going to move on to Ben Edgerly Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record,
Welcome.
Ben Edgerly Walsh. I'm the Climate and Energy Program Director for the Vermont Public Interest Research Group, or VPIRG. I deeply appreciate the opportunity to speak to this issue today. As you've heard, Global Foundries is a major energy user in Vermont, and this is not to be too colloquial about it, but a big deal. So I'm glad your committee is digging into it. Broadly, I want to touch on two things that I would urge the committee to examine more, in addition to the conversation you've already had today. One, the state policies that Global Foundries is petitioning to be deemed exempt from, and two, the potential ratepayer impact. So on the state policy side, essentially, as I read their petition, they're arguing that due to what they describe as the different nature of the new utility they are asking to create, Global Foundries should be, in their view, exempt from both as a user of electricity and as a utility, as significant portions of Title 30. And some of this has already been touched on, but just to put a fine point on it, among other things, they argue that they should no longer qualify for the Self-Managed Energy Efficiency Program, or SMEEP, which requires them to spend roughly $1 million a year on energy efficiency activities, that they should also not be subject to the Renewable Energy Standard. I'd also note, and this would be sort of what I would see as a follow-on effect, that if they in fact do exit, whether they themselves are required to comply with the Renewable Energy Standard, either under state law or the conditions of a CPG, there, I believe, would be a 10% reduction in Green Mountain Power's obligations under Tier 3 of the Renewable Energy Standard as well. So that I have not deeply contemplated the potential impacts of that, but 10% is significant. And they argue that they should not be covered under much of 30 VSA 209, including sub D, which is about funding efficiency Vermont's work, which, in the normal course of things, if they took a step back from SMEEP or SMEEP was repealed, one would imagine that they would then have to pay into Efficiency Vermont, just like every other ratepayer in the state. So they're saying that should not apply to them. And then same thing for big chunks of 218C, which is least cost integrated planning, and includes comprehensive energy efficiency programs, which is something that kind of predates Efficiency Vermont, as a statewide model. But you could imagine another utility having their own comprehensive energy efficiency program outside of Efficiency Vermont, the way that Burlington Electric Department does. But they're saying that that would not apply to them either. We see these claims as arguable. Certainly, I agree that getting your legislative council's take on them would make all the sense in the world. But, and I'm being deliberate with my wording here, as we have not decided whether to potentially intervene in this matter. If you accept the argument that those sections of state policy should not apply to them if the CPG were granted, I would urge the committee to consider whether that this is the policy outcome that you are looking for. If that argument's accepted, it would be because the type or the class, what have you, of utility they're describing was not contemplated by earlier legislatures, as it did not exist. That does not mean that it was the intent of earlier legislatures to exempt such an entity, and certainly not that this legislature should allow such exemptions now or in the future. The gentleman from Global Foundries mentioned their proposal to essentially stay with the renewable energy standard and SMEEP over the next several years. And certainly, it's clearly in the petition. I'm glad that it was discussed today. But the legislature very recently passed and strengthened statutory targets around greenhouse gas emissions for 2030 and 2050, both of which would fall far outside the time period that they are saying that they would still functionally be complying with the renewable energy standard and SMEEP programs. He also mentioned development of plans that will be submitted around efficiency and renewables to the Public Utilities Commission. That they are asking for submission of those plans to be a component of the CPG that they would be granted. And a number, and I'll touch on a few of these, but a number of parts of the conversation I've heard so far, I think really beg the question of why are they stopping there at plan submission as opposed to stronger CPG requirements that actually speak to making sure that they are engaging in renewable energy and efficiency rather than simply taking their word for it. I believe I heard the gentleman from Global Foundries mention that they have among the lowest carbon pollution and greenhouse gas emissions of their facilities globally, here in Vermont, and that they do not want to see that increase. That is good to hear. However, state policy is not that greenhouse gas emissions should not increase. State policy is that greenhouse gas emissions need to decline in line with climate science. That's what the Solutions Act entailed, not a lack of an increase. It also was very clear that, and again, I'm not arguing with the truth of these things, but he spoke quite a lot about corporate policy, about customer demands. I certainly imagine that there is a corporate policy at Global Foundries that speaks to efficiency and renewables and greenhouse gases. Certainly, we're seeing globally, a real increase in the demand of both residential or end user customers and industrial and commercial customers for lower greenhouse gas emission products. But that is different than state policy. Essentially, what the petition argues is that the state of Vermont should cede energy policy authority for this 8% of our electricity usage to corporate policy and customer demands of Global Foundries. And that would be a very different policy than the state has for any other electricity user. The last point I want to make on this, and then I will shift just very briefly to the possibility of ratepayer impact. Senator Pearson, you asked why ask for the exemption. My understanding of their argument is that they don't feel like they're asking for an exemption. They are saying that they actually can't be part of these laws anymore because of how the law is drafted. Now, not trying to litigate whether that is correct or not. that does not prevent them from asking to be bound in the CPG that they are asking the Public Utilities Commission for to comply with requirements either in line or more stringent than state policy. That is not what they are doing. They are asking to be required to file reports periodically about what they are doing on renewables and efficiency. So if they are serious about heading in the direction that they're talking about around renewables, around efficiency, I would expect that they would be going back to the Public Utilities Commission and asking to be bound by those kinds of requirements rather than just transparency related requirements going forward.
Okay.
The last thing that,
Ben,
sorry, go
Ben,
ahead.
It's hard for any of us to be told there is a limit to our power. But in my experience, if you change zoning ordinances, they do not apply to anyone who has already, entered the process. And that's generally the way most permits work. They enter under one set of rules, and that's the set of rules. So I'm not sure if we start changing things now, what that authority is. And I see Maria's there, but the system we've set up, there's a certificate of public good. We have the board and we have the department who is supposed to represent the public interest. So I think we'll have the department in to talk to us. I'm not sure if there has been something filed, a case filed, or a request filed, how much we can get from the PUC now. Oh, Maria's here for H360. Okay. So, and it's not, we will get our legal counsel and we will talk to the department, but that's my first question is, does anything we do now make any difference? I don't know. I know what the general procedure is in permitting, but we'll look into it.
Let me speak to that issue briefly, and then I'll touch on ratepayer impact. And then I recognize that I think I started testifying before I was supposed to end testifying. So you have other folks on deck, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time. On that question, I will not attempt to answer that. That's a question for your legal counsel. I will, however, point out that there were a whole bunch of utilities in Vermont in 2015 when you passed the renewable energy standard. And the fact that they existed prior to 2015 didn't mean that the renewable energy standard didn't apply to them. So
Right.
whether
Yeah, well, that was a general law we passed.
Yes.
To take in. Yeah, that was a general law to already existing businesses. That's different than going through the permitting process.
I fully understand that. My point is merely that were this CPG to be granted and Global Foundries to be operating as a sort of different type of utility, that does not mean that that type of utility
Right.
is forever and a day exempt from state
Right. No,
law.
it does not.
You could pass laws in the future. So the last point I want to make on state policy is, just going back to the point that they are 8% of Vermont's electricity usage. There is a state law on the books now that requires Vermont to ultimately get to 80% reduction in carbon pollution, net zero carbon pollution by 2050. And the electric sector is a substantial portion of our greenhouse gas pollution. So if we're essentially pulling 10% or around about 10% of one of the three big sectors out of many of the requirements that right now are driving at greenhouse gas pollution reductions, that from BPERG's perspective is concerning from a state policy standpoint. Now, let me shift briefly to ratepayer impact, and then I'll wrap up. So I want to be clear at the outset, I have not had the opportunity to dig into or examine in a really detailed way the possibility of ratepayer impact here. However, I do want to just restate some of the points that have been made here already. We're talking about 10% of Green Mountain Power's territory. That's significant. Obviously, you've heard from the two prior witnesses that there would be a relatively small ratepayer impact from this action. I'm not arguing right now whether that is correct or not, but if it is not correct, there could potentially be a significant ratepayer impact, and that obviously the Department of Public Service has an obligation to look into that. I understand that you'll be hearing from them, and that absolutely makes sense. The PUC has an obligation, and I think it would also make sense, and this is a policy matter for you to decide, but from BPERG's perspective, it would make sense for the legislature also to more thoroughly investigate that potential impact. And the last point I'll make there is that the payments at a high level, the payments over the next several years that were described suggest to me, the fact that those payments are needed in the near term suggests to me that in the medium to long term, there potentially could be ratepayer impacts that have not been fully vetted here today. And that feels like a substantive matter that should be examined more thoroughly. So with that, I again very much appreciate the opportunity to speak today and would be happy to answer any questions the committee has for me.
Okay, committee, any questions? Sandra Bray.
Just a quick one. Mr. Walsh, I think you referred to the petition currently filed with the PUC, which I was not aware that there was such a petition. So I don't know if you're the right person to ask for it, but I think it'd be helpful to members of the committee to see the petition so we see what the current proposal looks like. Did I hear you correctly? There is a petition filed?
There is, and I got it from EPUC. And I mean, obviously you can get that from any of the witnesses today.
Yes.
I can provide to the committee several of the specific sections that I referenced in my testimony of their fairly lengthy petition.
All right, so thank you. If you can send along whatever you'd like to share. So I'll turn back to Global Foundries. Mr. Reader, could you have someone on your team send to the committee the petition that's been filed, please?
Absolutely. And it's actually Title 30 VSA Section 231. But
Okay.
absolutely, the team will send this to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Senator Sorokin. You're muted, Michael.
A quick question. When was the petition filed?
I believe both, ours was filed right around March 15th.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Committee, would you like to take a 5 or 10 minute break, and then we're going into committee discussion on 360? Would that work? Okay. It is 2:44. Let's come back about 5 minutes, 3. And we'll have some time for committee discussion. Does that work? Come back at 3 o'clock. It's easier that way.